Guys, coming back for The Walking Dead, Season 6, Episode 11, Not Untie, and I was really looking forward to this episode. The Walking Dead has really been on this streak lately of just really great episodes, especially the time jump last week. I really think that it benefited the show, because it really got us away from any melodrama we needed with them grieving over characters, and this was another really great episode, I have to say. And yes, I know a lot of people are saying not much happened here. I really see this episode as much like last year's episode, where, you know, when it was during the Oscars, where we got introduced to Aaron and his group, and then we started to get to Alexandria, and the next episode we were in Alexandria. Very much like this episode, but very different as well, because the group of me in this episode is much different than the Alexandrians. Let's just get into this episode. There's not a whole lot that happened, but there is quite a lot that happened. It's still, I'll say this, the episode was very interesting. Like, I was interested the whole time. Let's just get into it. Especially after that cliffhanger. But we actually start with Sasha and Abraham. They're walking into the Alexandria fence and him telling her war stories that she laughs at. He mentions Maggie having a baby and says it's a brave new world. He says, see you tomorrow, but she says she's taking a new watch shift, and she says Eugene is taking over for her with Abraham. He's not thrilled. He says, see you around, and she says, yeah, and walks away. She flashes the peace sign. He offers it back, and I like this chemistry building between Sasha and Abraham. I told you guys in the beginning of the season that I really didn't know how to feel about Sasha and Abraham. I don't really know if I like the chemistry brewing between them. But where this is going is interesting, because then we see Abraham in bed with Rosita, who we knew he was having sex with. We've seen them have sex before, and he clearly is still in a relationship with her, but we can tell that while he's in bed with her, he's still thinking about Sasha, and Rosita says that she taught Eugene about weapons, and he's teaching her about chemistry, and he flirts with her like he wasn't thinking about another woman, and we don't know if that first scene actually happened. In fact, I'm pretty sure that first scene was in his mind. This is him, he was talking to Rosita, and it was actually Sasha the whole time, and she throws him a necklace she made for him. Abraham says that she's almost perfect. Rosita tells him to show her and says, shower. He says in a few. She looks at the necklace she made of the broken towelite and thinks more about Sasha, and he's really got a dilemma here, because you can tell that he really does care about Rosita, but he wants to be with Sasha. That's just who he likes, and I think he still, deep down, does care about Rosita. Like, I think he'll always sort of care about her, but I think it's part of the reason why he's so torn, because he really cares about both of these women, but he doesn't really know who to be with. And it's not really a love triangle, because in terms of Sasha, they're not fighting over him. You know, this isn't Rosita wants to be with him and Sasha does. I don't even think Sasha really sees him that way right now. I mean, we don't really know. Again, that first scene, I don't know if it was real or not. So, interesting stuff there. We did see, though, in the standalone episode with Daryl, Sasha, and Abraham, they definitely do have chemistry. So, I can understand why Abraham wants to be with Sasha. I can definitely understand that. So, Maggie is putting tomato stakes that night when Glenn finds her. She says they can grow more tomatoes going more vertical, and Maggie stressed that she hasn't seen any growing yet, but Glenn says that they'll grow and it'll be okay. Obviously, they need to grow crops, and they see two people running into a basement, and they go to investigate, and then we see Jesus, and as we know, Jesus, he did not leave, as we know, and we find out more what's going on with Jesus. Jesus sits on the stairs of the house and looks at pictures. Carl puts a gun to his head and asks why he's in the house, because he was supposed to leave, and for whatever reason, he hasn't. Jesus says he's waiting on his mom and dad to get dressed. He says his name is Jesus, and Rick comes out as Abraham, Daryl, and Glenn rush in with guns. They all sit down to talk, and I like that they didn't, again, just kill him again. They really are thinking through with what's the best thing to do. Don't just kill him, listen to what his agenda is, then you could think about maybe killing him or not. So, they talk about, they ask how he got out, and Jesus says one guard can't wait 2 exits, then says he checked out the arsenal and it's good, but their provisions are low. He says that that's not a lot of food for 54 people. Jesus says they're on the same side, that of the living. He tells him he and Rick could have left him out there, but didn't, and he says his job is to find other settlements to trade with, and he says he stole their truck because they loaded like they look like trouble, and is Ron, and Jesus says that their communities can, in fact, trade. So, he is a community, and, of course, their community, so that he wants to trade, and he says that they have food and other provisions, which, again, is stuff they need, because Maggie was just talking about how they have crops that are not growing, and they might, and Maggie asks if he's already trading with other groups. Jesus tells them that their world is about to get bigger, and that, when he said that, I'm like, okay, I am very interested in what he's talking about. So Daryl packs to leave. Denise gives him some food for the trip. He declines it. He takes the cake and says it looks like shit, and Denise says shit is better than roadkill. Carl loads gas cans, and then Rick comes out and says they have to take the risk to see if it's true. He also tells him that he was going to tell him about Michonne, and Carl says he doesn't want to go because his missing eye will make a bad impression. And I like that we found out that Rick and Michonne just happened. Like, they weren't really hooking up. This was just something that just happened this night. And maybe they were trying to be, like, mother and father to Carl. But, that hookup that they had, that was a hookup. That wasn't like they haven't had sex, before. That was a hookup, and I like that Rick tried to tell him about it, but I can understand why Carl doesn't want to. Obviously, his eye patch, he's worried it's going to scare people, and Daryl, Abraham, Rick, and Michonne, and Glenn and Maggie decide to leave for the ride to the new place. Glenn has his hands on Maggie's belly as she sleeps. Abraham asks if they were trying to get pregnant, and Glenn says that they talked about it, then asks why, and Abraham says that given the dangers of the world, he's shocked anyone would make a baby, and Abraham definitely has a point, especially, with the threat of walkers out there, things like that. It's really not the, smartest thing to do to, in fact, make a baby. It's really not the smartest thing. So I can totally understand, why he thinks that way. So definitely, I think that's a very interesting that we saw that. Definitely interesting. So I can totally understand that. And basically, Glenn says that they're trying to build something. And, he says how they're trying to build something. Hang on one second. Someone's calling me. So Glenn says they're trying to build something. Abraham says that he's keeping his stuff covered and plans to double up. Michonne and Rick hold hands, and I like that they're keeping this relationship. I really do like the relationship between Rick and Michonne. Jesus sits behind them staring at them, and Daryl then spots a car crash that looks recent. He doesn't know where it came from, but it's recent, and they pull over. Jesus says it's one of his, runs for the door of the RV. There's a burned walker trapped under the car, another impaled in the grill. So Rick holds a gun on Jesus, says if it's a trap, this won't go well, because obviously it's not going to go well. So Jesus says his people aren't fighters. There are tracks to a nearby building, and Daryl mentions the firecracker trick that Jesus pulled on them. They handcuff Jesus, leave him with the others while some go to see if they can find his people, and Maggie is left with a gun on Jesus while the others go into a building. Inside, they proceed with caution because they don't know if, they can hear snarls of walkers, so obviously they're really worried that there could be walkers, but there aren't any walkers in this episode. This might be one of the first episodes in a while where we didn't really see any walkers. They put a couple down, then they tell the people to come out. They find two who put their hands up, but then Daryl takes out a couple more walkers. They find out more, who says his friend is in there and hurt from the crash. Abraham creeps through the place listening to snarls. The injured guy comes out. He grabs him. They help him out. And they load up Jesus' people into the RV and drive off. And Harlan then introduces himself to Maggie. She introduces Glenn. He says they found medications they need, so we may have found others. Harlan says that he's a doctor, and Glenn asks about prenatal vitamins. Harlan says that he was an obstetrician before, and so they hit the jackpot. And basically, that's something they need. They need medications. I mean, again, they can't get resources easily, and they need medications. And Jesus keeps an eye on the injured Freddie, who says that he thought Abraham was going to kill him, and he thought it was finally over and saw his dead wife clear as day, and he wanted to die, you can tell, because his wife is dead and he kind of wanted to be with her. And he sounds upset to be alive, which is honestly really interesting, but kind of makes sense. I mean, especially if your wife is dead, I mean, you're kind of alone, and you need people to stick by you, especially someone for him that his wife is dead. I definitely think Freddie's gonna die. I'm gonna say that right now. Freddie, whoever this character is, if we see him again, he's gonna die. So the RV gets stuck, Jesus says they're there, and the wheels are stuck in the mud. They all get out. I will definitely say this. They did a really good job making all these characters really interesting. Like, these weren't like the Alexandrians where we met them and it's like, I don't know, they're kind of interesting, they're kind of not. This, I really thought they stayed interesting here because they're all not from the same family. They're all just people that live together, and Jesus keeps in, I just read this. So Jesus says that that's the Hilltop. They are at another walled community that's not at all like Alexandria. And at the gates, people have guns out. Jesus tells Cal to stop it. They refuse to give up their guns. Harlan says they saved them. Jesus says he'll let them keep their guns, then says they ran out of ammo months ago. Jesus says, I'm trusting you, now trust us. Rick looks around, gives a sign, and Jesus tells Cal to open the gates. They do. They use a plantation house inside. They see crops growing, a blacksmith, someone feeding chickens, and more signs of life. Harlan tells Maggie to come see him in the medical trailer later. He goes off with the injured Freddie. Jesus says that there was a nearby power company, and that's where they got the materials from the walls. He says a lot of people came from FEMA camps and brought the trailers. And Jesus says that the house is famous. It's called Barrington and was a living history exhibit. So locals came because they figured since it was built to survive before modern conveniences, it would still be good. So he points out that, so you can tell this is a very stable place where they are. He points out the tall windows at the top and says they can see for miles around. They head into the huge mansion. I'm not kidding you. This is literally a huge mansion. This is not like the little thing that they have in Alexandria, like the house that they have. This is a mansion. This is literally probably where rich people live before the apocalypse. So Jesus has mostly been converted to sleeping space, and Gregory comes out and Jesus introduces him, and this scene between Rick and Gregory is really great. He says that he's the boss, and Rick introduces himself, but the guy says to go get cleaned up. Rick says they're fine. Gregory says go get cleaned up. It's hard to keep this place clean. Jesus tells them to follow him, and Rick, you can tell right away that these two are kind of clashing. I mean, Gregory clearly runs this community and Rick runs the other one, but you can tell that Rick wants to run this community. I mean, that's just how he is, Ricktatorship. So Jesus tells him to follow him. Rick whispers to Maggie that she needs to talk to Gregory because he shouldn't, plus she needs to start doing these things, and basically, Daryl and Abraham talk about Michonne and Rick getting busy, and he asks Daryl if he's ready to settle down. And I like that everyone's kind of talking about Michonne and Rick. Like, they can't really believe that Rick and Michonne had sex. They just can't get over it. It's actually kind of funny. There is a lot of subtle humor in this episode, which I really appreciate. It's one of the things that made last week's episode so great, is the humor. And the fact that it was still here, little inklings of it, I really do appreciate, because it's something that The Walking Dead has never had. In fact, there are most people say that last week's episode was the first episode with humor, which I don't know if that's true, but really cool. Definitely like seeing that they're trying to keep the show somewhat positive, because it's gonna get really bad. We know the end of the season, it's gonna get terrible. I mean, it's gonna get crazy. It's tragic. I know how bad Negan really is. So basically, Daryl says if he's ready. He asks Daryl if he's ready to settle down. Daryl asks if he thinks she'll settle, then walks off. Maggie comes to Gregory's office because, of course, Rick said to talk to him. Because I think Rick knew he wasn't going to get through to Gregory. He's just the leader, and he's not going to get through. And he calls her Natalie, and she corrects him firmly. He says he came to this place once when it was a museum. He asks if her community is this nice, then asks if they're growing crops. He says Jesus told him they had guns. He asks about the infirmary, and Maggie asks if he has enough to trade, because obviously they want to trade for crops, and Gregory says that she can see what he's built. He says Jesus told them that they are short on food, and Gregory says they don't have shit, and he's happy to help, but he can't give things away for free. He tells her that people can work there to learn their share, and he says she'd be welcome to come stay there, and says he can make it worth her while. She says coming on to me, and she says she knows he needs bullets and medicine. He calls her Natalie again, says good talk, and he says they're doing fine, then asks if they are too. And Jesus tells him that Gregory will trade, but just wants the best deal. He says they don't need ammo because the walls will hold, and Rick pretty much threatens him if they don't get food. And Jesus says he'll go talk to Gregory, asks Rick to give him a few days. Michonne agrees, so Rick says yeah. They hear noises, and then one of the wall guards says they're back. They all go outside. Ethan comes back. He tells Gregory that Tim and Marcia are dead, and we don't know who they are, but just knowing that they died, I mean, they tell him that Negan says the delivery wasn't enough, so they kept Craig, and you can tell that they are definitely working for Negan. Then Ethan says he has to deliver a message from Negan and stabs Gregory coming. The group is attacked by the three that came back from Negan, and Daryl snaps the guy's arm that's strangling Abraham. Ethan is choking Rick, and when Michonne threatens him, Rick stabs him in the neck, and Rick gets up covered in blood, looks at everyone, and says, "What?" Which is the perfect response. I mean, his response of him saying, "What?" Yeah. Like, what just happened? Why all of a sudden did they just start attacking? So a woman runs up and punches Rick, and Michonne clotheslines her. Some guys come at them with sharp instruments, tells Rick to throw down the gun. He says no. Jesus tells everyone to calm down. The locals go check Gregory, and Daryl asks if Abraham is okay. He laughs and says he's better than all right. A woman cries over Ethan's body as Maggie watches. Jesus comes and says Gregory will live. Rick asks about Negan and asks who he is. Jesus says that Negan is the head of the Saviors, and you can tell how Rick is getting involved with Negan. I mean, you can tell that if you don't do what Negan wants, Negan will attack you. So Rick is probably not going to do what Negan wants. I can tell that right away, and especially if Negan finds out that they are responsible for the deaths of all the people that, were on the motorcycles. Negan is definitely going to go after Rick. You can definitely tell. So he says they came as soon as the walls went up and made demands, then beat a 16-year-old boy to death in front of them, told them they need to understand, and Jesus says that Greg isn't the leader he would have chosen and made the deal with the Saviors. They get half of everything. He says in return, they don't attack, kill them, and they don't attack, they just kill them, and Daryl asks why not kill them, and Rick asks how many does Negan have. Jesus says they've seen groups as big as 20, and Daryl says that this guy's just a boogeyman. Abraham says they took out some of Negan's guys, and You can tell Negan's a threat to Rick because he has so many more than Rick. I mean, Rick has a good amount of a group, definitely, but he's not like Negan. Like, Negan will kill no matter what. Rick says that they have food and we have skills. Maggie says it will cost them something. Jesus comes out, says Gregory wants to talk to Maggie only. When Rick steps forward, Rick tells her Deanna was right to choose her, and Jesus tells Maggie that Greg can be a prick. She says she knows, and which, yeah, obviously him calling her Natalie. So Maggie goes to see Gregory, who's now bedridden. She says that he's lucky that they were there. Gregory asks how they knew how they can accomplish what they're saving they can do. And Maggie says, give us supplies and we'll take care of the Saviors permanently. Because it's clear the Saviors are a threat to this community and they need to do something to take care of the Saviors. And Greg says before she didn't like the idea of working for them and now is offering to do this. And Maggie says that they are willing to work for food. Greg says that he'll get them their supplies and we'll talk to Jesus after the arrangement. Gregory says it's fun and exciting. Maggie stares at him, says half of what you have. She says Negan is expecting more and more from them. And she says pretty soon they won't have anything left. Then what? She says no ammo, no fighters, and he's a dead man. Maggie says half of it, all of it right now or no deal. And Maggie says that she has leverage. And Gregory says congratulations, it's a deal. He asks if she wants a kidney or anything else. And Maggie says she wants one more thing. And later they pack up the RV. Jesus says that even Negan didn't get this much up front. And they bring out the guy who makes deliveries and says, we need information, you need it to come. The guy thinks, then says, yeah. They pack up all this stuff. Jesus asks if he can come along. He says Michonne still has knives, and Rick asks Michonne if she's up for this, and she says it's going to be a fight. Rick says that they'll win because they have to. She agrees, gets into the RV. I like that they're positive, but we know they're not going to fight. We know that they're not going to win. I mean, we know how powerful Negan can be. We know that this is not going to work out as well as they think. Rick looks around the place. Maggie's getting an ultrasound from the OB. She and Glenn hold hands while they listen to their baby's heartbeat and see the little pod that they're growing. It's actually a nice scene to see that, but it really makes me feel like these characters are in danger. I mean, they always seem to give these characters subplots and then they kill them off. That's how it always seems to be. Take Beth, for example. When they had the whole thing with Beth and that hospital, they killed her off. I mean, things like that. That very much seems like what's going to happen to Maggie. I really do think Maggie's probably going to die this season. I don't know. I mean, there are reports that Lauren Cohen got a haircut, and she says that it doesn't have to do with The Walking Dead, but with her being killed off in The Walking Dead, but I don't know. I mean, I say you can never trust what they say, so later they show Michonne a picture from the ultrasound. She hands it to Daryl, who smiles. Abraham checks out too and smiles at Glenn, and that's how the episode ends. So, overall, guys, really great episode. I really did enjoy this one overall. Sure, not too much happened in this episode, but I think we got an idea of what this, what the Hilltop really is, which I like getting introduced to the Hilltop. It was a good place overall. But you can tell that they definitely are threatened by the Saviors, which Rick says they'll be able to take on, but I don't know if they'll be able to do it. I mean, I think Rick thinks that they can do this, but we know how powerful Negan is, and we know how powerful the Saviors are. Will Rick be able to take them on? We'll have to see. They have a trade now, so we'll have to see if this trade actually works, because, again, you can tell with Negan that if you don't do what Negan wants, Negan's gonna come after you. That's what it seems like to me, at least, that basically Negan's he's not a very reasonable guy. If you don't do what he wants, he's coming after you, and that's just how it is. You're done if you don't do what he wants. That's just kind of how it is. Abraham really has a tough decision to make here. Abraham really needs to think, do I want to be with Sasha or do I want to be with Rosita? Because he's with Rosita, but if he's thinking about Sasha, he really needs to think about this. And it really also makes me worried that one of them are going to die. And I kind of feel like if it had to be between Rosita and Sasha, he would kill Rosita. I definitely think he'd do that because he just wants to be with Sasha. But does Sasha feel the same way about him? We don't really know. We didn't really get to see Sasha's perspective of things, and I'd really like to see how that's going to be. I like this arc with Carl, where he's kind of afraid of how people are going to perceive him because of his eye patch. I think it's interesting to see what's going to happen there. Do you think that Carl can scare them, things like that? I don't know. I think it's interesting the way they're going with that. The one character that really stuck out for me out of all of them, like I said, Gregory's a really interesting character. I like that he's kind of a dick to Maggie, and I like his dynamic with Maggie as well. It's kind of funny, actually. I like that he keeps calling her Natalie. Funny stuff there, the way that was done. But I did like that this episode went from really kind of silly to really dramatic. I also really like the background music. Really gave you that, like, country feel. Like, this really does feel like some sort of, like, plantation. Just the background music I thought worked really well in this episode. It really wasn't Walking Dead. It felt more like Justified, and I kind of like that background music. A good Justified throwback, definitely. Oh, how I miss Justified, really. I really do miss that show. But the one character we did get introduced to, I can't remember his name, but the one that, what was his name? Let me find it. Trying to find his name. Freddie. I think Freddie's gonna be a really interesting character, because as we know, his wife died, and he kind of wants to die, so I kind of feel like he definitely is gonna die. We'll have to see what happens with his character, though, but I kind of feel like his character is not gonna live for very long, because he wants to die anyway, so if he wants to die, there you go. Maggie having this baby, I want to say that she is going to have this baby. I think she is, but I really do feel that Maggie's in danger. I don't know, just the way they're going about this, I do feel like she's in danger. We'll have to see what's going on there. Everyone questioning Rick and Michonne's relationship is kind of funny. I like the way they're handling it. I think that's kind of interesting, with the way that was done. Definitely with them questioning their whole relationship. But definitely, what do you think is more of a threat? Do you think that Hilltop, Negan, what do you think is more of a threat here? Negan or the Saviors? It's clear the Saviors work for Negan. It seems like there are a shit ton of people that work for Negan. Is Negan gonna find out that Daryl is the one that killed all the bikers? I mean, he's got to find that out eventually, because that all comes back to that. That's how this all started, guys. I mean, if you remember, they had that whole encounter, you know, Daryl, Abraham, and Sasha, they had that whole encounter with the bikers, and then Daryl made them, you know, like, they all exploded, and Daryl survived, if you remember. So if Negan finds that out, then definitely you can tell how he's going to get to Rick. Definitely it's going to get very crazy, see what's going to happen there. But overall, guys, I'm really loving the second half of the season. And maybe it's because the first half of the season was just, it was the same thing over and over again with the same plan. We haven't seen Carol in a while. We haven't seen Morgan in a while. Where they are, I don't know. We haven't seen them. But overall, I really did enjoy this episode. I also like that Rick and Michonne are staying together. I think it's nice to see that. I like the dynamic between those two. And I like that Rick really is assembling this team here. Like, he's really trying to figure out, do we kill, do we not? And they're not, you know, they let people died, but no one really cared about. It's just they died, and they know that, but they had to let these people die to make the trade. So overall, guys, I'm going to guys saw this episode. Love to hear your thoughts on it, and we'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for the it will be for the March movie preview, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.